everyone, welcome to this week's episode of The Gracie Note. On last week's show, I introduced you to Canadian filmmaker, writer, and director Robert Budreau. He is the director on the brand new Chet Baker film Born to be Blue, starring Ethan Hawke. You can check that interview out by clicking here. This week, I have a special treat for you. I'm going to share with you my interview with Ethan Hawke, who plays Chet Baker in Born to be Blue. This interview wasn't filmed, it was just recorded with audio. It was part of a roundtable that I had with Ethan Hawke, Robert Budreau, and a few other reporters that were allowed to partake in the question and answer period for this film. It was a true pleasure meeting with Ethan because once we were in the room together, he really came off as a person who, when they're answering a question or they're involved in a conversation with you, they're looking you straight in the eye and really thinking about their answer and not just kind of an automated response, which was really great. And from what he says during the interview, it really seems like he dives into every role that he does, and he's even hard on himself when he thinks that he can do better and that he should be even working harder. And that's a character trait in a lot of artists who are perfectionists and really want to always do their best work. For those of you who don't know who Chet Baker is, he is a jazz musician that was out around the same time as Miles Davis, and he was called nicknamed the James Dean of jazz for his, devilishly good looks. In the 60s, he actually had all of his teeth knocked out in a fight. And you can imagine how difficult it would be to try and play the trumpet with no teeth. And then he had dentures put in and had to relearn how to play the trumpet. And even that in itself was, as it's portrayed in the film, is an absolute struggle and something that Ethan Hawke really portrays to the depths of every darkness. You can see the trailer for Born to be Blue now by clicking here. Something great about Ethan Hawke is that he transitions exceptionally well into his roles. When you're watching him perform, it's not Ethan Hawke as Chet Baker. It's Chet Baker, and the essence of Ethan Hawke drains away, and you really believe that it is this person at this point in history. I have to say though, my favorite Ethan Hawke performance has to be when he played opposite Denzel Washington in Training Day, and I think that's because his great line that he delivers near the beginning of the movie. They're trying to tell him about the streets and, oh kid, you'll figure out the streets because he's the new cop on the beat. It's a great line. You've got to control your smiles and your cries because that's all you have and nobody can take that away from you. Now, without further ado, here is my interview with Ethan Hawke and Robert Budreau, the artists behind Born to be Blue. Thank you again for watching. Don't forget to be gracieful and check out the article in the description below for more information. Bye guys. What was it like developing Chet's voice for the film? I know that he had such a precise delivery, the way he spoke and sang with breath and all that kind of thing. So for you, what was that like, writing his voice and creating it for screen?
For me, it's funny. It makes me realize how often I don't work hard enough. Like, when you have a real person, one of the first things they do in acting classes, they have you, like, if you're supposed to play a part. I remember Peter Weir did this for us on Dead Poets Society. It's like, write your character's biography. And it's supposed to be like 5 pages long, and you have to write like what your mom's name is, and what your grandparents, what your first kiss was, and what kind of car were your dreams. And when you're playing a real person, you have all that. It's just complete, and it's just what details you choose to include, which ones you choose to ignore, which things. But if you want to, you can find out what kind of car he drove in '67 and actually have that car. You can find out what he would order. And so what happens is you become much more immersed in the details. And I found it really exciting. I mean, luckily for me, Robert was like me, which is that I liked the ones that helped unlock the character, that helped me do the interpretation I wanted to do. And we ignored the ones that weren't speaking to this moment, to the story we were trying to tell. It's kind of like, I always think that you define your Hamlet by how you cut the play. Mm-hmm. Just that speech doesn't support what you want to do, so cut it. It's too long anyway, so, And I loved it, and it made me think that I need to do a better job in playing non-real people at really fully imagining them.
In developing Chet, do you think that it was hard for him to ask for help? And because it seemed like it when for example, when he goes to Dick's house and he's
very prideful,
walking back and forth. And everything.
One of the things about early success that is really hard is that you start to having a high expectation for yourself that doesn't lend itself for some of the natural failures that life is going to bring. That's why a lot of child prodigy stories don't have the narrative one would have hoped for. But I also think that he didn't really want help.
For money,
that's what I was going
Yeah.
One of the things is he really wanted to live the lifestyle he wanted to live, But there's a lot of arrogance to go with. I mean, that's the weird thing about any kind of person that performs at that high of a level is that weird dance where arrogance and insecurity are the same, two sides of the same coin. It just keeps spinning around. Intense arrogance, intense insecurity. And it creates a kind of gravitational pull that is interesting to watch and hard to live.
But I think he certainly, had a big ego, but at the same time, I think in the phase we're looking at him, if you look at he did a series of mariachi records where he's, he's wearing sombrero and looking a bit like an idiot playing this bad elevator music. He needed the cash, but he knew he also needed his chops. But at the same time, he secretly would trash those guys because he knew he was way better than them. He just couldn't get there yet. So he had his ego on the one hand, but he was humble on the other hand.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the phase that Dick had to help him in our movie. And so I think that's why you see that kind of dual thing happening where he's...
There's a guy who tells a story, a friend of his tells a story. There's an album that he did for money in the same period. We don't cover it, but it was an album called Blood, Chet, and Tears, which is all Chet Baker covers of Blood, Sweat, and Tears songs, right? And Chet did it, and apparently as he was driving home, he just actually had to pull the car over and puke out of self-loathing. It's just like, I just hate myself so much. This is one of the worst experiences of my life, playing that shit. And so it's somebody who he would do it. There's a lot of artists that wouldn't do it, or some that would do it and think it was all right, But he was just in agony over it. But he needed the money. Yeah.
The opening scene of the movie, just like the first sentence of an amazing book, it just captures you right away with the tarantula crawling out of the trumpet and everything, and the set and the decay in the prison is just beautiful, and you're covered in sweat and shaking, and it's really, you want to know, how did this person get here? So can you talk about the creation of, was it a real tarantula? Did you reach out for it? What was that? How was that creating that scene like?
It's funny because the idea of, when I was first doing my initial research many years ago, I remember reading about his time in Lucca Prison, which is where he served, and I remember reading somewhere about this thing where there was cockroaches, and he had this kind of, he formed a relationship with a spider because he was just singing to himself. He was just by himself.
Right.
And I always had this idea of this spider symbol, which I thought could set up kind of the surreal world of the film, and obviously could represent demons and all that stuff. And so it was one of the first things I ever wrote at the very, very start of the process, and it managed to stay through. In certain cuts I had it in and out, and at the end I'm glad it was in because it was always one of those original symbols for me.
Which ones of those stay and which ones, some of them just serve as a guide light that you have to drop later, and then sometimes it's cool. I like it too.
But it also for me was the more like the overt nod to this idea of Dino De Laurentiis coming to see him in Italy, and just a brief glimpse of his life in Europe, because we don't cover any of that in the movie.
Right.
We just get this tiny little taste, so when it comes around, it's a bit of a frame, and so that's kind of where that came from.
Wonderful. Thank you.